This is the story of John Templeton, a boy from Tennessee who was taught to think differently, to see the world in terms of what was possible instead of what was not. Iconoclast, legendary investor, spiritual traveler, seeker of God, contrarian. Harvey and Vella Templeton of Winchester, Tennessee, welcomed their new son John in November of 1912. From early on, Vella instilled in John, as well as his older brother Harvey, a great sense of adventure and curiosity.
Vella is a well-educated woman, which was a little unusual for sort of down-home Tennessee.
She took him on trips across country.
New York and Philadelphia and down the coast.
She had an adventurous spirit, and clearly this influenced Uncle John.
Vella gave the boys, both of them, free rein and the means to do with the world what they wanted to do.
In Winchester, at that time, you could go into a hardware store and buy sticks of dynamite, and they would walk down the street.
And go blow stumps out of the field.
Kaboom!
It was great.
I think what he loved most about his mother was the fact that she allowed him to be independent.
John's father, Harvey Templeton, was a serial entrepreneur.
John's father was a kind of a self-made lawyer.
He created a cotton gin business.
He was involved in lots of different business ventures.
Certainly my grandfather was very entrepreneurial.
His office was up above a bank that overlooked the courthouse. When property came up for auction, he would buy it very cheap.
Then he talked to the farmer. I'd like you to stay there, don't move. I own it, but this is your home.
And I think Uncle Johnny learned a lot from his father about that.
John followed in his father's footsteps, hunting for bargains and displaying the beginnings of great entrepreneurial spirit. His first business of note was at the age of 8.
He used to buy a lot of firecrackers and sell them to his friends.
He sent away to Ohio to a major production plant and got 3 giant boxes back, and he sold them for 3 times what he paid for.
He also dabbled in automotive interests, rebuilding a broken-down Ford purchased for $10 when he was 12.
He and his friends were driving way before they were 16 years of age.
They bought a Hupmobile, and then they found another Hupmobile that they could take parts from.
They combined them all into one vehicle.
And ended up with a car that would go to Cowan 6 miles away every 3rd try.
And at the age of 17, John's entrepreneurial spirit extended into the production of a not too delectable but otherwise serviceable Tennessee wine.
They bought a keg of raisins, and the keg of raisins comes with a sticker on it. It says, "Warning, do not add water and sugar to these raisins or it will turn to wine." Literally, the sign said that. They slipped out there one night to sample their goodie and pulled the lid off of it and stuck a ladle down in there. And Uncle John took a big sip. He said, it's got lumps and stuff in it. It was full of bugs.
John's father tapped his entrepreneurial spirit, promising the young Templeton cotton bales in exchange for good grades.
Grandfather had promised Dad that if he got all A's in every report card, he would be given on credit a bale of cotton. And that was real money in those days.
When it came time to think about college, John, with his steadily growing single-mindedness, decided only one college would do.
Uncle John asked a local farmer where the best college in the world was.
The man said, Yale College.
One of the things that was required was a math course, which they didn't offer.
So John went to the principal of a high school and said,
Sir, I need this course. And the principal was, well, John Marks, if you can get 5 other students, and if you teach the course, and if you all pass the final exam, then I will certify the course.
He taught the course, they all learned it, and they could pass tests on it.
From a very early age, he was identified in Tennessee for having a kind of maturity about him.
And a farmer who must have been 70, walking down the road, said, "Are you John Marks's boy?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, you know that John Marks, he was born old."
There was a kind of a wisdom and a foresight and a future-mindedness in John Templeton.
He seemed to have direction. He didn't necessarily know what was at the end of the road, but he had a strong sense of direction.
Having worked so tirelessly to earn his place in New Haven, it soon looked like the Depression would send him right back home, because John's father could no longer afford tuition.
My grandfather was not the world's best businessman.
He speculated on the futures market in Chicago, and then he lost everything.
lost it all.
They were bust.
After his first year in college, his parent called him up and said he couldn't support him anymore, so he had to work his way through the rest of Yale.
My grandfather had to work 3 jobs in order to pay for school.
He always wanted savings. He believed in thrift. He didn't want to be unstable like his father.
John also developed another source of income to support himself.
Uncle Johnny was gambling his way through Yale to make ends meet.
He was able to make a lot of money, playing poker with some of the more wealthy kids at Yale.
His intelligence and mathematical abilities were such that he really understood probability.
You wouldn't have gotten a clue out of his face.
His poker face would be next to nobody. She didn't know what he was thinking.
Poker taught him the importance of taking measured, educated risks.
When to make a big investment and when not to.
And if it was today, they probably would not let him gamble at the casinos.
Through these efforts, John learned enough to pay his tuition through the rest of his years at Yale. And amazingly, almost in spite of them, did so well academically that he went on to become a Rhodes Scholar. John tried to study business at Oxford, but was told that gentlemen do not study business. So he studied law instead. But what was most notable about his Oxford experience was that he was able to travel extensively. Travel which was financed with poker winnings.
His travels took him to the 1936 Olympics.
He took a trip around the world, the Middle East, the Far East, China, Japan.
He went to various countries on deck passage, so he didn't pay for even a hammock because it was cheaper. He ran out of money in South France and went to Monte Carlo. He financed the rest of his trip.
He'd been gone for so long. His mother actually thought he had died. But he came back with this great bedrock of knowledge.
He had come from this small town in Tennessee and really hadn't seen the world. His eyes were opened.
When he returned to the United States, John had more than just a new global outlook. He was secretly engaged to Judith Dudley Folk, a Wellesley College graduate and debutante from Nashville. She was a charming and beautiful Southern belle who had once earned the title Most Dated.
Her dance card was always filled.
He found Judith's date book And on one Saturday, she had 7 different dates.
She was very popular at Wellesley.
He had received a letter from someone when he was in Oxford that he better come home right away, because if he wanted to marry her, this was the time, or she was going to go off with somebody else.
Friends were writing to say, you know, we've found that Judith is engaged to 3 other men.
He always said, but I won. So he was determined, you know.
He was, I think, quite the Romeo.
When Uncle Johnny and Judith were dating, they would get in the car and drive around
in a Stutz Bearcat.
It was a Pierce Arrow, which was a 4-seat convertible.
And sing Violate Me in Violet Time.
Violate me in violet time.
In the vilest way that you know. Ruin me, ravage me, utterly savage me. On me no mercy show. It was a great song.
He was very fun-loving.
Judith agreed to move into a 6th-floor walk-up outside of Harlem with John to save money.
They were in a cold water flat in New York.
They would save 50 cents on every dollar.
Furnishing their house largely by going around and finding stuff on the streets.
If they decided they wanted a really comfortable stuffed chair, well, they went to Goodwill. They didn't care one toot whether it fit any decor or anything.
Like John, Judith was not bound by convention. She worked full-time in advertising, which was unusual in those days for women.
She had her job, he had his.
She'd gone to college and she felt like she wanted to use it.
He was really enamored with the kind of person that she was.
Dad was proud that she was someone who wanted to carve out her own way.
I believe that he viewed women as fully capable as men.
John started his financial career at the investment firm of Finner & Bean, the predecessor firm to Merrill Lynch. Just prior to World War II, John looked at the market. He figured that many of the underperforming stocks would gain value if war were to break out.
His first major stock purchase was putting $10,000 into 104 penny stocks right before World War II.
He asked his boss at the time to front the money for him. The boss thought it was a bad idea, but he trusted John.
And by 1944, that $10,000 was worth $44,000. He was always trying to find things that were out of favor.
In 1940, he purchased a small investment firm which only advised 5 families, and it was called Templeton, Dobro, and Vance.
When he really started his investment management company, he didn't pay himself anything for 3 years. Nothing.
But then the business began to prosper, and he decided to surprise Judith with their very first vacation.
I remember the Christmas of 1950. I got my toys. My mother was looking around. I don't even see a box. And he says, look up in the tree. It was a 2-week vacation to Bermuda. They had motor scooters. And she was behind him. And a truck coming the other way clipped her on the side of the head. She was at the hospital and died 2 hours later.
It was a tragic accident.
It's difficult for a child to pick up how he was responding to those events because he wouldn't reveal anything.
In the most painful parts, he would not have said anything to others.
Judith's death affected Uncle John very deeply.
I don't know that he ever got over that.
After Judith's death, John threw himself even further into his work. It was his son, Kit, who brought the next love into his life, Irene Butler.
Well, we lived 2 houses away. Kit used to go over there after school and have cookies and milk.
Irene was pretty considerate.
Kit was the one who invited my mother to tea, and so that kind of set the stage.
She loved him long before he was wealthy. She loved him for who he was.
John and Irene were married in 1958. Their family now included Irene's 2 children, Malcolm and Wendy, as well as John's 3 kids, Jack, Candy, and Kit. And in an unusual move designed to bring them all together, the newlyweds decided to take the entire family, including several cousins, on their honeymoon.
We went on the Queen Mary to Europe.
And we were all between the ages of 11 and 19.
At the start of the trip, he told us this is the amount of money that you have to spend on the trip.
And if we ran out of money, it was just going to be too bad. We wouldn't be eating then.
My parents sat in the back of the bus for 8 weeks, holding hands, probably clutching hands.
We stayed in youth hostels, and we ate a lot of bread and cheese. That was a very valuable lesson in thrift.